And you hit on something very, very important, and that is to love the orphan. So,
yes.
Let's not get into this with this idea that, I don't know, we're just going to be spiritual, amazing people. And, I don't know, we're making some marks with God, kind of
like we're
earning
really
our salvation.
Spiritual here. We're really
turning
virtuous.
super spiritual, and God's going to be impressed with me. But to love God and to love these orphans.
Yeah. What is your motive?
At the end
what are
of
you
the day,
seeking?
And again, I think we need to get beyond phileo love. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Phileo love is probably not going to cut it.
It's going to be that Jesus-like agape.
You got to get to
love
agape.
That sacrifices and lays down everything for the good of another.
Big time.
Yeah.
So I think a heart search for all of us, and again, not just adopting the orphan, but getting involved in
anytime we get involved,
fathers in the field, or whatever sort of ministry we're doing.
Yes.
We need to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Do I really have a heart of love? And welcome, friends, to the Generations broadcast. Kevin Swanson with you. Today, another segment of What Does the Bible Say About That? And the Bible, of course, is there to equip the man and woman of God for every good work. Joshua Shwiso in studio with me. Every good work.
That's what it says.
That's what it said. Yeah, just check it out.
Apparently it's sufficient.
So it's sufficient. The Bible is sufficient for
assumption.
Faith and life. Okay, so today, what does the Bible say about adoption and caring for orphans? And do the sins of the fathers pass down to the adopted orphan? The sins of the natural father/mother passed down to the adopted orphan. So these are the questions that come from our audience. And I want to start with the principle itself, from the Word of God itself, James 1:27. That's the principle that drives everything on this one. Pure religion, undefiled before God and the Father, is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So that's it. True religion. You want the fake stuff? You want the real stuff? Let's do real stuff. I'm done with all the fake stuff. I want to do authentic stuff.
James makes it really simple. He could have listed other things, but apparently this is the focus if we want to identify true faith.
He breaks it down, bridle the tongue, right? And then start, caring for the orphan and widow. And that's a good question for all of us. How are we doing?
Yes.
How's the real religion stuff going on in your life?
What are we doing?
Are we caring for the fatherless and the widow and keeping ourselves unspotted from Hollywood? I mean the world.
Or whatever variant of the world you want to mention.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that, we're to care for orphans, but there is no one-size-fits-all approach to helping the fatherless and the orphans of the world. And I'm just going to quickly throw out a few things. Fathers in the field.
Yeah, we heard about that.
Yeah, we heard about it in the Shepherd's coverage. Yeah.
And that the ministry is basically about fatherless boys and how men in the church, in the local church, can come around them and mentor them over the process of 1 to 3 years. And they actually make a pretty extended commitment.
It's an amazing ministry.
Yeah.
It's an amazing
They teach
ministry.
skills. They teach hobbies. They teach the Bible. It's very fruitful.
And I want to put that ministry, I want to put that guy on this podcast.
We could get Michael on the podcast.
Michael on the podcast, yeah. Pro-life ministries like Love Life, where you as a church can, reach out to the fatherless, to that little one in the womb.
Right.
That is not going to be aborted, but you want to be there to sort of help that pregnancy along, and then hopefully land that little fatherless child into a good family.
Yes.
And it could be an adoptive family, could be with the single mom. But either way, pro-life ministry, Love Life, very good. Also support indigenous works in Nigeria. Orphanages are dealing with hundreds of orphans right now where their parents have been killed by terrorists. I mean, it's a bloodbath in Nigeria right now.
Yes.
Also, Joy International. Joy International's been on the barefoot guy.
Remember that? Yep.
Yeah, he's been on the program a number of times. The Mukti Home out in Nepal cares for survivors of child trafficking, ages 8 to 18. It's hard to even imagine.
Not only are they orphaned, but they're dealing with this horrific abuse against them.
Horrible. But Joy International is one of my favorite ministries. Support Joy International this Christmas season, friends. So many ways you can help. There are wise ways to help the orphan and widow, and there are unwise ways to do these things.
Yeah, and we need to seek wisdom, I think, from others that have been doing it is one thing. Certainly when we consider adoption, talking to adoptive parents, those that have been in this engaged in this ministry, is helpful because there are many blessings, but also many challenges depending on the nature of that adoption.
I'd recommend my brother. My brother has adopted. Yeah, and my brother. If anybody wants to contact my brother, just email me. They're just a wealth of wisdom. In fact, I've encouraged him to write a book on their experience. One of the most successful. I mean, it's quote unquote, right? But just the love they've shown these kids. My brother, exemplary.
Yeah.
Tim. Tim has done an amazing job.
He has his own adopted children, but then also being on the mission field. Oh, yeah. They've also seen a lot of orphans probably in difficult situations with children.
He had anywhere from 20 to 40 young kids in his home at any point in time.
Teaching,
phenomenal. He was on the streets of Manila, actually embedded into the streets of Manila, helping orphans, living in the slums of one of the poorest cities in the world for, I think, a period of a year or two. So, get some wisdom. Absolutely. Now, a couple of Bible verses as well. I'll throw out. You can throw out some Bible verses too, because what does the Bible say about this? Job actually talks about helping the fatherless. In Job 29:12, he said, "I deliver the poor who cried out, and the fatherless who had no helper." I mean, that's beautiful.
Yes.
How would you like to be that guy?
Yeah, that's what righteousness looks like.
Oh, I want to be that guy.
Summary.
Can I grow up and be like Job?
Yes.
And then here's a big one, and this ties into the subsidiary question before us today, and that is, do the sins of the fathers really dog and drag and provide a drag to the redemption of the adopted orphan? And here's what God does concerning the orphan in Proverbs 23, verse 10. Listen, "Remove not the old landmark, enter not into the fields of the fatherless. For their Redeemer is mighty, he shall plead their cause with thee."
Yeah.
Okay, now what that tells me is that God is especially concerned for this category of the fatherless.
Right.
And even if they had a pretty rough heritage, God is there to go before them. God is putting them in a special category where their Redeemer is mighty and he will plead their cause.
Absolutely.
So that's got to be an encouraging passage to every adoptive parent out there.
Yeah, gives you hope in the midst of that ministry. And I was thinking of Psalm 68, very similar kind of idea. If you read all of Psalm 68, it's this really mighty psalm, right? God is marching out with heavenly armies, as thunder,
powerful psalm.
And what does it focus on? Verse 4 of Psalm 68, "Sing to God, sing praises to him, lift up a song to him who rides through the deserts. His name is the Lord, exult before him." And then what does it say of him? "Father of the fatherless and protector of widows is God in his holy habitation." And then verse 6 adds, "God settles the solitary in a home," which might speak to this adoption principle, right? That those that are alone, he gives them a home. He leads out the prisoners to prosperity, but the rebellious dwell in a parched land. So once again, the might of God.
He's looking out for the little guy.
He's looking out for the little guy.
Literally, the little guy.
Yes.
Just a couple of cautions and some pointers that I think could be helpful. One is, I think we have to be careful in the adoption process that we're not feeding a market supply with demand, because there are people out there selling babies through IVF, hired wombs, other abominations. And it's interesting, as I was reading the history of I'm trying to think, the missionaries into the Congo in I'm going to say about 1870s, 1880s. They were right there on the road that was supplying the slave trade. And they would, the slave traders would try to sell the slaves to them. And they would literally say, "If you don't buy these slave kids, we'll just throw them away or we'll kill them."
Yeah. And so missionaries kind of feel on the horns of an ethical dilemma.
They were.
We want to rescue, but we don't want to fund this.
They were.
What do we do?
Well, they refused any kind of economic remuneration to the Arab slave traders. Absolutely refused it. We're not going to do any kind of, buying the slaves. We're not doing that. But when they saw that the kids or whatever were tossed out as they were, taken across the deserts and the jungles of Africa, they would go and rescue them. So they would rescue these kids.
It's a good resolution because you're not rewarding evildoers. You're trying to avoid that, but you're trying to rescue as much as you can and care for.
Right. And so here's what's tough is there are children today who are often produced in laboratories and they die in the process. Many die in the process along the slave trade route. Just like the kids were dying along the slave trade route in Africa, children are produced in this IVF process in laboratories. Many die in the process. Others are put in cold storage. And some Christian families adopt these frozen embryos. But the current rate of 150 adoptions of these frozen embryos a year, that's just a drop in the bucket to the 3 million IVF treatments done each year, out of which 2 to 5 embryos are unused or discarded or frozen. If Christian moms are expected to bear everybody else's embryos by adoption, how in the world are we ever going to keep up with the millions upon millions of these embryos produced each year by IVF?
And if we attempted to get all of them, of course, we would be funding in terms of paying, we would be funding the process on a massive scale.
Right. And the adoption cost runs anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a year. So the whole business amounts to buying and selling babies. Now, I think what we should do is say we're not buying any of these. We're not putting any money into it.
There wouldn't be any.
But we're here to adopt.
Yeah.
We are here to adopt, but we're not paying a cent for it. We're not going to get involved in this buying and selling baby business. We're just not doing that. Also, some poor families sell their children in Asia and Africa to orphanages or through orphanages. And we have to be very, very careful that we don't produce a market for the buying and selling of babies. Yeah. And so we want to be very aware of the background of the children involved. Are they double orphans caught in the crossfire of wars, genocides, and that sort of thing? Yeah. I think it's important to ask the questions first. What are we talking about
funding this
here?
Industry, or are they really just been put in a situation of need where we can rescue?
Right, exactly. So other thoughts in terms of biblical background on adoption and reasons for adoption?
Yeah, well, I was thinking of Isaiah 1 verse 17, which it speaks to this as a basic matter of justice, which Fathers in the Field likes to use this verse. It says, "Seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause." So it speaks to an active kind of engagement with this issue, right? Like as we talked about earlier on here, we have to find some way we're engaging in this justice matter.
So how do we do that as churches? Let's take a diaconate of a church or families in the church who pull together, and you see where these fathers have done very cruel things to mothers. And perhaps children conceived in rape and incest, perhaps children just plain old-fashioned abandoned by fathers and mothers.
Yeah.
How do we seek justice for them?
Yeah, well, of course, there's going to sometimes be those ministries that we can support, like you mentioned earlier on. There may be some ministry that's really deep into this. They have the expertise and the wisdom. They're doing good work, and we support them. And yet it could be that some of our families are going to actually seek to adopt and bring these children into their homes. And we have many in our church that have done that as well.
Let's throw out some wisdom pointers. Obviously, we can't exhaust this issue today on the program, but I would say there are special needs adoptions that do require an extraordinary amount of grace on the part of the adoptive parents. International adoptions oftentimes involve extreme special needs. In other words, what is the sad fact of the matter is that they have these special needs. That is, they were conceived in a situation where there's a great deal of alcohol and drugs involved, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes physical challenges, sometimes spiritual and emotional challenges. Physical challenges can be dealt with. And I think, again, I don't know as if that's insurmountable for families. But parents need to check their calling on this, especially when dealing with spiritual challenges, attending some missionaries or some adoptions. And I actually draw in missionary work sometimes. This has been an analogy that I've used that I think is helpful, partially because I've studied so much in international missions and the history of missions, and found how much effort it has taken to get involved in missions. And oftentimes missions would take 7 to 10 years before anybody had their first convert. So it took a fair amount of plowing extremely hard dirt to come about with some good results. Yeah. And some American missionaries I find in traveling the world, they'll jump into a foreign context and they're simply unprepared for it. They get chewed up in the process. There are spiritual challenges that you have to be sure that you're called to. We're not saying that a person's faith will guarantee a certain outcome. God is always sovereign in terms of the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not talking, if you get enough faith, then you will guarantee a certain outcome. And yet, there does seem to be a need for some pretty concerted faith when dealing with high levels of spiritual challenge. And I drew in Matthew 17 on this when the disciples of Jesus were facing a serious spiritual challenge in relation to the little boy. Now, he wasn't an adopted little boy in this case, but these...
he was afflicted.
He was afflicted, yeah. This is a massive spiritual challenge, and they failed. They failed. I mean, they got an F minus, in terms of dealing with this little boy.
Take care of it.
And so they come to Jesus in private, and they ask him the question, why could we not cast this spiritual force out? And Jesus said to them, this is verse 20 of Matthew 17, Jesus said, because of your unbelief. For verily I say to you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say to this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, you shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible for you. Howbeit, this kind does not go out but by prayer and fasting. So the question I put out to Christian parents is, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Are you called to this? And I would be the first to admit that I have been the kind of guy that rushes out. I'm kind of the Peter.
I'll do this. I'll be fine.
I'm a little Peter-ish. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the kind of guy who goes, what? You mean we need to walk on water? I rush off the boat. And then before you know it, I'm like, what am I doing? So I know what it's like to do this kind of thing. And I think Jesus is concerned about the faithless and perverse generation, unprepared for certain spiritual challenges. And we need to carefully assess ourselves. And off air, I looked at Romans 12:3.
Yes.
I do think this ties in very much to whether or not I, us, you, y'all, are called to pretty high level of spiritual challenge when it comes to adoption. Romans 12:3 says, be sober, think soberly. To yourself as to the measure of faith God has given you. So, you know what? If I don't have the measure of faith to go charging off onto the water, to be the guy to take on a spiritual challenge, perhaps I need to stay in the boat for the time being.
Yeah, you need to carefully assess whether that's the calling that God has given you.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it, I have been very encouraged by the families that we know in our congregation who have loved the orphan and who really have evidenced such strong faith. It's been an inspiring thing to me to see that. Like, wow, even though this challenge happened and that challenge happened, they're still going. They're still believing. They're still praying. So God does give grace. If that calling has been laid upon you, He will give grace sufficient.
And you hit on something very, very important, and that is to love the orphan. So, I mean, let's not get into this with this idea that, I don't know, we're just going to be spiritual, amazing people, and I don't know, we're making some marks with God, kind of
like we're
earning
really
our salvation.
Spiritual here. We're really
turning
virtuous.
Super spiritual, and God's going to be impressed with me. But to love God and to love these orphans.
Yeah. What is your motive?
At the end
what are
of
you
the day,
seeking?
I mean, and again, I think we need to get beyond phileo love. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Phileo love is probably not going to cut it.
It's going to be that Jesus-like agape.
You got to get to
love
agape.
That sacrifices and lays down everything for the good of another.
Big time.
Yeah.
So I think a heart search for all of us, and again, not just adopting the orphan, but getting involved in
anytime we get involved,
fathers in the field, or whatever sort of ministry we're doing.
Yes.
We need to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Do I really have a heart of love? I have to ask myself the same thing when I'm pastoring in the church.
Yep.
Do I love these people?
And oftentimes in the Christian life, we find we have some mixed motives, and we ask the Lord to purify our hearts of any impure motives, that we were seeking the wrong thing, because insofar as we're actually driven by the wrong motives, we do tend to get disappointed along the way.
Yeah. One more point I'd throw out there, and this is just something I've obtained through interviews with people who have adopted children, and that is dig in for the long haul.
Yeah, it's a long haul ministry.
This is going to be the long game. Be ready for the long game on this. One of the most outstanding and amazing examples in all of missionary history was the William Watson family in Australia. Okay, they get out there in the 1840s, and the Aborigine mission, if you've read Taking the World for Jesus, I've got a whole section on this, and I want to get more on the Watson family. I just found another article about them. It was really good online. But William Watson's, they're my heroes, because, I mean, you talk about slogging, tough slogging. The Aborigines, as far as I could tell, all the way back into the later 1700s, let's say 1780s, not a single convert. I couldn't find a single one. They worked at it for 60, 70, 80 years. Yeah. And as far as I could tell, they were making zero progress. The first people to make significant progress after 80 years of trying to reach out to the Australian Aborigines occurred with the William Watson family, and they adopted children into their homes.
Okay, so that was a part of that.
It was adoption. And from what they've been able to tell is that somewhere around the 1860s, 1870s, they actually had record of children raised in the Watson home that were committed Christians to the end of their lives. This was the first evidence.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about some pretty tough stuff.
And very involved. I mean, you are right there. I mean, because you're all,
for one
you're
thing,
all in there.
These kids they adopted were abused.
Okay.
And I don't want to talk about their abuse. It's just too ugly to talk about.
Yeah.
But they've been abused, and so they brought them in their family. The whole living room was like a hospital. They set up a hospital in their own home, and they adopted these kids. And by God's grace, these were the first Aborigine converts that we know of in history, as far as I could tell. Others may have done more research, but I did a ton of research, read about 1,000 pages on Aborigine mission history. And but also, I had one more interview one time with a family that had been adopting kids back in the late 70s and 80s. And this father told me just a few years ago, I think we're starting to make some progress in the life of one of our adopted sons.
Whoa, just now?
And I'm thinking, I'm doing the math, okay, let's see. Right now it's like 2020, and we're talking about, so like 35 years later, you're finally making some progress.
That's sobering, but also hope-giving.
You know what? I think you have to be patient, and you have to hope in God.
Yes. Right. You're not going to be this amazing person that's going to fix everything overnight or in a year or whatever it is.
Yeah. So let's go back to this question. Josh, I really want you to address this question. Do the sins of the fathers, and in this case, I think we're talking about, the natural father. I mean, you take the orphan that's conceived in rape. Do the sins of the fathers get passed down to the third and fourth generation? I've got an answer for this, but I want to hear from you first.
Yeah, and we know that this is brought out a number of times in the Old Testament, that language of the sins being visited to the third and fourth generation. And in Exodus 34, verse 7 is one of these examples where the Lord says of himself, he keeps steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and the fourth generation. So one thing that's really remarkable about those instances in the law is that the mercy of God is so much greater than the judgments of God described.
And that's the point.
1,000 generations
that's the point.
Of mercy and forgiveness, or third and fourth generation curses.
And it's more about the ratio.
Yeah, the ratio is very important.
The ratio is 250 to 333.
That's an amazing ratio. I mean,
for those of you who've done your math.
We still could have said it'd be a great ratio if God said, well, I'm merciful to 10 generations, but cursing 3 or 4. No, this is an amazing ratio.
1,000 to 3 is a 333 ratio.
So it teaches us that mercy triumphs over judgment. The mercy of God is greater. And as you pointed out earlier, that they are right on the cusp of that redemptive they're that redemptive opportunity that we're looking for. We also need to recognize that generational sin is not some sort of automatic and unbreakable thing. Ezekiel 18 talks about how God still will judge the children for their own sins, but it is often the case that imitative patterns do flow down, right? Sometimes that's because they actually were seeing these things and they can imitate.
For one
thing,
we've got a genetic issue that goes roughly back to
Adam, right? So we're all dealing with that.
So we're all dealing with that one.
And then sometimes there are going to be there could be natural consequences. For example, we've talked about even health consequences that follow from the sins that came before. But that's not something that can't be fixed and redeemed or something that keeps you from the Lord, right? That could just be a difficulty that they face. So I think we always need to remember that faith and repentance can break that cycle. It's not as if third and fourth has to be fulfilled and we have to get through these generations. People can't be redeemed between that.
Well, let's take these two scenarios. The first scenario in which you're adopting from Vietnam or Nepal or somewhere out in the middle of nowhere where they have not had the gospel for 2,000 years. So they've got 70 generations.
Yeah, it's not just 3 and 4.
That exceeds 3 to 4.
Right. It's just all of history.
They've got 70 generations
Yes.
of nothing but not loving God and not keeping His commandments.
Yep.
And so you've already done. You're past
already
3 to 4.
fulfilled that.
You've passed 3 to 4. Okay.
That's right.
So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two is you're in a apostate age, which is pretty much the Western world.
Yes.
Where you do have the 3 to 4 generations of apostates who have done very nasty things. They've broken up family life. There's abandonment of children. There's all these things, and so you've got that 3 to 4 generation thing going. But because we're looking at America, we're looking at the Western world. You also have in the past, prior to the 3 to 4 generations,
faithful generations.
You have faithful generations. You've got 20, 30 generations that have already received the promise that because they love God, the mercy of God is going to be extended to 1,000 generations. I think of my wife. My wife was raised effectively in apostate generation.
Yeah,
she just was. I mean, just sadly. Yes. But by God's grace, she was saved, and so was her sister. So,
right.
So it was 100%.
Yeah, it's not as if it had to follow through. We have to get this curse.
The 3 to 4 generation curse did not affect her.
Yeah, that's right. And
so praise God. And now she goes back into her history. In fact, I just found her history where she somehow, I guess she had gotten a whole list. It goes back to 1740. And in 1740, there was a short, red-haired pastor in my wife's heritage on her grandmother's side. And he was well known as a pastor in England.
Okay.
So now that guy has got 1,000 generations.
Oh, yeah.
He's got the 333 working for him.
He's got a long ways to go.
He's got 333 working for him.
That's right.
On the 1,000 to 3 to 4 ratio.
Right.
So I hope that encourages people that are listening right now that, God's mercy is far, far more extensive and intensive than the judgments that indeed visit the generations.
Yes.
And we see it around us.
And the sober element is just to recognize you got a spiritual battle that they may be coming out of, right? Meaning if there was sin, transgression in that prior generation, there's going to be a spiritual conflict that must take place in terms of that redemption.
Super interesting stuff on this edition of the Generations broadcast today. Josh, anything else? Any other encouraging word? I guess what I would say is just get out there and do more James 1.
James 1, verse 27.
Love the fatherless.
Lots of opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's no lack of that.
Oh, yeah. And do it every day. So, friends, let's just live out the real, authentic Christian life. Visit the fatherless and the widow in their affliction. We don't do it enough. Let's get out there and do it. This is the heart of God. This is the redemption of Jesus that visits our world, first with us, and then we spread that grace to others as well. If you have anything else, any other questions, anything to add to this discussion on adoption or visiting the orphan and widow in their affliction, please just email us at mail@generations.org. And this is Kevin Swanson with Joshua Schwiso inviting you back again next time as we continue to lay down a vision for the next generation. This has been a production of the Generations Media Network. For more information, go to generations.org/media.